can we proceed to the agenda as follows? If Clerk, you could hit the big red button first to go live, if members are agreed, yes?
That's done.
Okay, thank you. Can I inform members that the draft minutes of the meeting held on the 29th of September are pages 30 to 37 of the meeting pack, and ask if they are content that the minutes are a true reflection of the proceedings of the meeting?
Great.
Okay, I'll sign the minutes in due course as required. Can I move the next item of business as the matters arising? Items 5.1 to 5.2, pages 39 to 60, responses from the NIAO and NIPSO to the committee's request for views on strengthening and correcting their respective MOUs with the committee. Can I ask if members are content to note at this stage and consider the revised MOUs at a later date? All agreed?
Content, yeah.
Okay, can I remind members that at the last committee meeting an issue was raised around audit committee membership and the difficulties that a membership of 5 and a quorum of 2 presented. Can I inform members that this matter is currently being considered and seek agreement to commission research to establish the background rationale for the membership and quorum of the audit committee. I've raised this, members, on numerous occasions. Obviously, if you take today as an example, there's the 3 of us in attendance. We have 2 apologies, and obviously it can be very difficult to get business done if we don't have quorum, and quorum's 2, and I don't think that's entirely reflective of a range of views of various members of this body. So I think it is important that that is considered, and just want to update you on that. So can we seek agreement to commission research as outlined? Yes. Okay, thank you. The next item of business, can the draft budget 22 to 25, the Northern Ireland Assembly Commission oral evidence, can inform members that the committee has not yet had sight of the executive's timetable for 22-25 the budget exercise. However, it is important that the committee scrutiny progresses ahead of the executive's process, so that the committee's position on the budgets of the 3 bodies can be reflected in the executive's draft and final budget documents. Can remind members that as part of the scrutiny process, the committee agreed to hold a number of oral evidence sessions with each of the 3 bodies. Today's initial session will be brief at 15 minutes, has been allocated for each, but more substantive discussions will take place at the next committee meeting on the 24th of this month, November, when the committee should have received comments on the budget plans and the Department of Finance and Public Accounts Committee as applicable. The first evidence session will be with the Assembly Commission, followed by the Audit Office, and finally the Public Services Ombudsman. So with that said, can I refer you members to pages 62 to 177 of the meeting pack for the papers of the Assembly Commission evidence session, and inform you that the Assembly Commission officials will attend today's meeting to give evidence on the Commission's budget plans for 22 to 25. So with that said, can we welcome to the meeting Clerk Mrs. Leslie Hogg, Clerk, Chief Executive to the Assembly, and Mr. Richard Stewart, Director of Corporate Services of the Assembly.
Chair, they're just being brought in now.
That's fine, thank you. Thank you, Clerk. I can see Mrs. Leslie Hogg, and you're most welcome to the committee. Is Mr. Richard Stewart in attendance as well? Yes.
Thanks very much, Chair. No, Richard hasn't been able to make it. Something has cropped up, personal matters, so unfortunately he sends his apologies, Chair.
That's fine. We're in good hands with yourself, Leslie, so you're most welcome as always. Can I advise that the session is being reported by Hansard, as you'll know, and the transcript will be published on the committee webpage. With that said, you're welcome to make opening comments. Thank you very much, Leslie.
Thanks very much, Chair. And I would like to thank you and the committee once again for scrutinising the Assembly Commission's budget, albeit this time for 3 years. I also appreciate we don't have much time today and that you have been provided with a briefing paper, so I'll try to keep my remarks as brief as possible and just highlight a few key important points. So starting then with income, perhaps the only thing to highlight is that the vast majority of income that the Assembly Commission will receive will come from executive departments for the recovery of ministerial salaries. The second category covers salaries and expenses paid to members. And again, the figures for each subcategory are included in the briefing paper. But there are a few anomalies in this budget period, largely influenced by the fact that an Assembly election is due to take place in May. Firstly, for members' salaries, the election sees a fall in the level of salaries that the Assembly Commission will pay in 22-23. This is because certain elements of salary, like the additional salary that is paid to the chairperson of statutory committees, that is not paid during dissolution. Similarly, salaries are not paid to elected members between the date of the election and signing the roll of membership. So that slightly reduces the members' salaries budget for 22-23. The second point to make about members' salaries is that an uplift of £500 will be paid from April 2022, and that is based on CPI for the previous year. And it's assumed, given the current rate of CPI inflation, that further uplifts of £500 will be included from April 23 and April 24. It's also worth noting that should the Assembly amend the role and function of the Independent Financial Review Panel in the next mandate, it seems likely that a new panel or remuneration board would reconsider member salaries. So just to point out that the Assembly Commission has not made any estimate of this, as that would be a matter for the new panel or board to determine. For constituency office running costs, it's anticipated that additional expenditure on establishment expenses will arise following the Assembly election. And while constituency office costs include a range of assumptions, I would like to highlight the inclusion of an allowance to cover additional staffing costs should members have a baby or adopt a child and is then absent from their constituency office as a result. So this is not included in the current determination, but the Assembly Commission intends to return to this matter at the start of the next mandate. There are also proposals to increase members' travel costs, as these haven't been altered since 2016. For members' other costs, the election will see the payment of resettlement allowances to former members, and the budget for this item is therefore substantially higher in 22-23. The third category in the Commission's budget is the largest, and it covers the salary payments for staff of the Assembly Commission and for the administration costs that are incurred to deliver the full range of services needed by the Assembly. The first of these, staff salary costs, is based on an average of approximately 370 full-time equivalent members of staff. This includes the current staffing levels for support for PMBs, which are being retained over the spending period. Provision is also made for staffing to deliver simultaneous interpretation as agreed by the Assembly on the 15th of June. The Commission's administration costs cover a wide range of expenditure items, including committee travel and expenses, building costs, rates, electricity and gas, and third-party support for the business-critical IT systems that we use, and the costs of our recurring contracts such as broadcasting, cleaning, catering, etc. We forecast that these costs will rise slightly at the start of next year, for example, because of utility cost increases, and then will remain relatively stable over the remaining years. The next category then is payments to parties under the Financial Assistance for Political Party Scheme, or FAP. This category sees a significant increase in our forecast. Firstly, the Assembly Commission is currently undertaking a review of the FAP scheme, as this hasn't been reviewed since 2016. That review has also been informed by the AERC debate next week on funding for an official opposition. While the Assembly has yet to offer its view on the AERC report, a figure of £100,000 has been included for an opposition party with 10 members following the next election, but that, of course, is subject to the will of the Assembly. The penultimate category covers depreciation and impairment charges. Over the 3-year period, these costs are likely to rise largely because of the expenditure that is planned under capital expenditure. The Commission expects to incur significant capital expenditure in 22-23 and 23-24. I won't go over all the projects as these are set out in the briefing paper, but there is substantial investment planned in our broadcasting infrastructure, in our back office systems and also our IT systems. Committee members will see that some projects have slipped from this year into next year, and that has been a frustration. Our ability to engage expert assistance to assist with some of these projects has been impaired partly by COVID and also availability issues, and therefore some of these costs now move into the subsequent years. However, we are starting to see things opening up, and the capital expenditure programme for the next 3-year period we believe is both ambitious and achievable. And just before I finish, Chair, I would again like to record my thanks to the staff of the Assembly Secretariat. The past 2 years since January 2020 have been extremely busy and demanding, firstly with the resumption of normal business and then with COVID. And we are now facing the challenges posed in the final year of an Assembly mandate. So once again, Chair, I can't say enough about the professionalism, dedication and expertise of our staff. And I really want to take this opportunity to put on record my thanks to the Assembly Secretariat for all of their efforts in supporting the Assembly and all of its members. So thank you again for the opportunity to present the Assembly Commission's budget proposals, and I'm very happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much for those opening remarks, and I would like to echo your words of thanks to the staff throughout the Assembly. Absolutely exceptional, very courteous, always very helpful. First there if you need anything, and I have to say, look after the estate extremely well, and in turn us as members. So I too would like to thank them all, and I think it's important that members of the Assembly who benefit so much from their help and expertise show that appreciation in a very strong and public way. There's a number of things I would like to touch on that you have raised. Obviously, with a number of potential increasing costs, not so much for this financial year, but certainly in the years ahead. And I know that you've touched on the appointment of a new remuneration board that will be considering the likes of salaries, etc., etc. I think even before that happened, it would do no harm, Clerk, if we as a committee sought comparisons from other jurisdictions, being Scotland, Wales, and even looking to the south of the island to see the level of salary that is paid that is similar to that of those in public life here in Northern Ireland. Just to see where things are in other jurisdictions, because I know this is probably going to be a discussion going forward, and it would do no harm for this committee to be a wee bit ahead of the ball in that regard, just to anticipate potentially what will or could happen here. The other issue that has been raised, Leslie, with me, and I know that it hasn't been included in the most recent determination, but it is that, and I know you've touched on a review as well of travel expenditure for members, given there hasn't been an increase since 2016. Now that will lead to a considerable increase, I would anticipate, from where it's currently at. But a number of members have raised concerns about no accommodation, I suppose, or mechanism for which accommodation to be provided for members, particularly coming into the end of the mandate, where legislation is clogging up the system, and it's very highly likely that MLAs will be on the estate in the Assembly chamber to quite late hours. My memory of 2017 was exactly that, leaving the Assembly at 12 or 1 in the morning and returning quite early the next day. Now, previously there was things in place to ensure that members could stay in Belfast, which is the case for MPs in London. It is the case for TDs in Dublin. It is the case for Scottish members of Parliament, and also Welsh. But there is no mechanism here, and it poses serious questions over health and safety if members of the Assembly are in the building to quite late and then having to travel up 2 hours home considered?
Thanks very much, Chair. So maybe to respond, yes, I'm sure the committee might want to look at the salary issues. Just by way of example, the salary of a member here is £13,000 less per annum than in Scotland and £16,000 less per member than in Wales. So that just gives you a bit of an idea of where salaries are here and by comparison. But as I say, the Assembly Commission didn't want to try and anticipate what changes, if any future remuneration board or panel might make. In relation to the accommodation issue, the members' travel expenses that are currently in the determination can be used to pay for accommodation for late night sittings, etc. So that was envisaged being part of that members' travel allowance. You're quite right that there hasn't been an increase from 2016, and at the minute, again pending any future determination that the Commission might make, we have notionally put in a 3% increase year on year to the travel costs.
The main reason for raising that is the health and safety issues for members coming into the more busy period of legislation. I just anticipate long nights over the course of the coming months to get through the legislative agenda, which the Speaker has already highlighted is quite difficult to get through. So thanks for that, Leslie. That's the questions I have. Mr. Allister, would you like to ask, and then we'll go to Mr.
Yeah, a few questions if I might. I was looking at paragraph 18 of your report, where you remind us that the Speaker's salary, for example, continues until there is a replacement, even if the Assembly isn't meeting. Now, we had the experience from 2017 to 2020 of the Assembly not meeting, and yet the Speaker being paid on full salary. In light of that experience, has there been no review of that situation?
Well, the salary is determined by what would have been the Independent Financial Review Panel Board, and obviously the Commission intends to bring forward legislation to amend that. However, any salary considerations would still be for an independent remuneration board, and salary decisions are not taken by the Assembly Commission. You may also recall last year that the Assembly gave authority to the Assembly Commission to make decisions on members' expenses, but that explicitly did not include members' salaries, and therefore they are the matter for whatever will be the Independent Financial Review Panel or its successor. And therefore, while the Assembly wasn't previously conducting normal business, you may recall that the Secretary of State made some decisions in relation to salary matters.
But that didn't affect the Speaker. So if we had another interregnum, the Speaker would still continue to be paid his full salary as if the Assembly was fully operational.
Well, as I say, that would be entirely up to the remuneration panel or the IFRP, whatever the panel is, who will be making decisions on member salaries.
You mentioned the bill that the Commission is supposed to be bringing. It's a very long time since we had the first reading. Where is that bill?
Well, in light of all the issues with COVID and more pressing business, the Commission decided to defer bringing that forward in the current mandate, and it intends to return to that in the next mandate.
I see. Paragraph 33 of your paper, you refer to the extra costs arising from the proposed translation provisions. Can you quantify those for me?
Yes, that's 344,000. So you may recall.
Per annum?
Per annum, yes. So that would be based on.
So over the 3 years, £1 million?
Yes, and that would be based on 4 interpreters and two chief interpreters for both Irish and Ulster Scots.
So 4 interpreters for Ulster Scots, say?
Sorry, it's 4 in total. So it's really 2 interpreters for Irish, 2 interpreters for Ulster Scots, and then a chief interpreter for Irish and a chief interpreter for Ulster Scots.
So three for each?
Yes, that's correct.
And has there been any assessment of what likely usage there will be of Ulster Scots, for example?
Well, obviously, again, you may remember that the motion passed by the Assembly in June said that that was subject to determination of the usage. So the Commission will be considering the proposals in light of how best to implement this following the Assembly's decision in June.
So, will you engage, if you can find them, 3 Ulster Scots interpreters before you know what the demand is, and likewise 3 for Irish before you know what the demand is?
Well, that'll be a matter that the Assembly Commission will be considering in the near future, and there may be opportunities to employ temporary staff, rather than making permanent appointments.
We could arrive, could we, at the ludicrous situation that we commit to spending £1 million over 3 years for interpretation from one aspect or another that might never be used.
Well, the motion passed by the Assembly, demand was to be considered, and there was also to be a review undertaken after a 6-month period.
So is the demand to be reviewed before you advertise and recruit?
Well, this will be something that the Assembly Commission will be considering.
But you're penciling in the expenditure.
Well, we are.
Anyhow.
Well, we obviously have to take a view on the budget at this stage, so we have taken, a prudent view and budgeted for the expenditure at this stage. And then, obviously, going forward, we will return any surplus budget provision, if there is one, once the Assembly Commission decides the best way to implement.
Could I take you to paragraphs 44 and 45, the capital budget?
Jim, can I move to Alan Chambers? Is Alan still with us, Claire?
Sorry, I had one further question.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Jim.
Paragraphs 44 and 45 relate to the capital investment, and it lists certain matters. I see no mention of the roof of this building. Is that matter resolved?
No, that matter is still ongoing, and we're progressing with it as advised by our legal advisors.
But there's no capital budget to do anything to repair the roof?
No, we would be seeking for the contractors to repair the roof.
Well, that's what you told us last year. What progress have we made in that regard?
Well, we're continuing to seek resolution with the contractors.
Well, are there legal proceedings? Are there arbitration proceedings?
I'm conscious, Chair, that we are in public session and these are commercial matters, and we are following legal advice and progressing.
The roof is still leaking.
The roof is still leaking. I'm very conscious of that, and we are doing everything we can to achieve a resolution.
You can't tell us what has advanced in the past year since I last asked you about this.
Well, we are progressing, as you would expect, as advised by our legal advisors, and the best way to progress that.
Claire, can I make a suggestion? And Mr. Allister, I completely appreciate and understand the line of questioning, and I also appreciate Leslie's difficulty in sharing it in public session. Can I make a suggestion that report is provided to us with a full update in relation to this matter for our private consideration? Or at least that we discuss it in private at a future session.
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Would that be okay to you, Leslie? Yeah.
Yes, that's fine, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Alan, have you any questions for Leslie?
Yes, Chair. Just in relation to the remarks you made earlier about the Assembly staff, I certainly would want to be associated with that. Your experience, Chair, is my experience of them. In terms of the simultaneous interpretation that is going to be introduced in the Chamber, I'm not sure whether it's Leslie has to provide this, but what sort of logistics are involved? We've heard of the number of interpreters that will be required, but what will the logistics be? How will that be addressed in the Chamber, and has that the installation of that process, has that been costed yet, and if so, what is the figure?
There was a paper prepared for the Committee on Procedures at the time, and that anticipated that there would be capital expenditure costs of approximately £43,000, and that would include the upgrade of our translator booths, works in the press galleries and public galleries, member provision works, broadcasting works, and a few other bits and pieces, so about £43,000.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Leslie, thanks very much for being with us and for the very detailed submission that you provided, and also for taking our questions. And again, if you would pass on our sincerest appreciation to your team throughout the Assembly for the work that they do and the assistance that they provide to us all. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair, and those comments will be very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, members, just a slight question. Is there any further information, clarification that should be requested from the Assembly Commission for consideration at the meeting on the 24th of November? All okay, yes?
I would have liked to have heard a little more about the catering subsidy, where that stands.
Okay, in what way?
Well, we pay an annual subsidy to the caterer. I'd like to know what scale that's at presently.
Right. Claire, could we seek an update in relation to what Mr. Allister has just asked, and also following from the session we've just had, if members are agreed, I would like to see some form of comparative analysis of members' salaries for each of the other jurisdictions, including Wales, Scotland, and even the south of this island, who have multi-seated constituencies. I think it would help inform the committee prior to any future determination.
We have the figures in paragraph 21 for Scotland and Wales.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Chair, can I just check? You just want the Republic, you want research to, or I could probably find it out, or one of the team could find out. So that's the only one that's missing, because we have the other figures here.
Yeah, well, Westminster's entirely different because we have MPs in each of the constituencies, but when I look to the rest of this island, I can see that there's multi-seated constituencies with TD, so it's worth looking at as well. I think it's not for anything for this committee to consider, but there is obviously, if there is any future changes as a result of a new panel being appointed, then we at least will have information at our hand as to where things are in other areas.
And in terms of the information to be requested from the Commission, a report provided on the roof issue, and obviously we would consider that in private, and then the catering subsidy. So that's that for now then.
Yeah.
Yes, I did touch on the issue in terms of the legislative timetable, because of the demands on members to be in the House much later. Like, this is an issue for health and safety. It has been brought to our attention. I know other parties and members have raised issues, particularly those who have quite a distance to travel. And if you're in the Assembly for 2 days or 3 days, it does present considerable issues. So I think that it's something that probably should have been looked at, but it's not for the remit of this committee either. But it's something that I'd raise just to see if the Chief Executive of the Assembly had been aware of any potential issues in relation to it.
Well, the bodies will be coming back to give evidence, more substantial evidence, on the 24th of November, so we can pick up on those outstanding issues then.
Yes, okay. Thank you, Chair. Next item of business is a draft budget 22-25, Northern Audit Office. It's an oral evidence session. Can refer members to pages 178 to 305 of the meeting pack for relevant papers. And inform members that the officials in the Northern Audit Office will attend to the meeting today and give evidence on the Audit Office's budget plans for 22 to 25. So with that said, Claire, could you invite the members into the room, please?
Now present, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to welcome back before the committee Mr. Rodney Allen, Chief Operating Officer of the NIO, and Mr. Brian O'Neill, Director of the NIO. Can I advise you both that the session is being reported, as you'll know, on Hansard, and the transcript will be published on the committee webpage. We are slightly behind, gentlemen, and we do appreciate your presence, but I would appreciate it if you could keep your opening remarks as brief as humanly possible. Okay?
Thank you, Chairman. Members, I will, Chairman, endeavour to keep it to about 3 minutes. I'll try and whiz through this. In the document we submitted to you today, can I refer you to Figure 1, which shows that our budget spend is staff costs 69%, contracted costs and audits 14%, and office overheads, basically running costs, 14%. In terms of these staff costs of nearly 70%, that equates to 125 full-time equivalent staff for the budget year. That has been our targeted level of growth to deliver our corporate plan, and the committee has been supporting us in that to date. I've talked before to the committee, Chair, about the recruitment market as being very competitive, but nonetheless we are being successful on two fronts in particular. We've been growing our own talent, and indeed in September we had 7 new graduate and 3 new higher level apprentices all join us on training contracts. We've also been successful to a certain extent in recruiting qualified accountants with relevant skills and experience to help us bring that up. So all of that wraps around the overall investment in growing and developing our own capacity and capability to respond to the developments in auditing standards and indeed the additional quality requirements which are constantly raising the bar and driving continuous improvement in the services. The other budget area that I would emphasise is our contracted arrangements with our auditing and accountancy firms and practices. This represents 14% of our expenditure base. The paper shows that's £1.6 million. Some uncertainty, members, in this area, because we have had one contractor withdraw from contractual arrangements with us, so we're in the process of entering into new tendering arrangements for 15 audits. On the income side of the House, the position is relatively stable, except for an anticipated significant change in the third year of the budget period due to an anticipated end of our work on the European Agricultural Funds, work that we undertake on behalf of the National Audit Office, who report to Europe for all of the UK funding that is received. So our budget needs are summarised, members, on page 4, table 1. I draw your attention in particular to the 22-23 column, showing our expenditure 11.5 million gross, 2.9 income, difference of 8.6 million, representing 2.1% in comparison to the current year's baseline. That 2.1% is consistent with the position we presented to the committee and anticipated a year ago. I should point out that that is before some anticipated inescapables. So we have employers' superannuation costs for a new CNAG. The current CNAG is not part of the superannuation scheme. We're anticipating the next one will be, and increased depreciation costs for our newly refurbished building. We're also, in relation to that, we're also currently examining the anticipated valuation of the building when it is completed and the potential for an impairment in value, which we discussed with the committee before, and we will return to that separately. So this brings me round to our capital budget, members, and pleased to advise you that the refurbishment is on track to be delivered on time and on budget. And indeed, given the pace of the project, there is some uncertainty about the extent of payments that will fall due in around about the end of the financial year. So Department of Finance have advised that we should include around about £1 million in both financial years to allow for that. Of course, it will only be spent once, I hasten to add. In summary, if the committee approves our budget, it will ensure we continue to invest in the delivery of a strong, independent public audit function that provides effective support and assurance to the Assembly in the scrutiny of public sector performance. Hopefully, Chair, that was a bit whistle-stop, but gives you a sense of what we're asking for.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rodney. It got straight to the nub of some of the main challenges, so thank you for that. You had mentioned, we're having difficulties with this mic today, but I was right in saying that you said that there was an issue with the contractor in terms of the bill. Is that right?
No, it's an issue with the contractors that we employ for our audits, Chairman.
Right, I'm at half of that. Okay, that's grand. Yeah. Okay, I just didn't pick it up. So, Rodney, I'm going to ask you, your optimum number of staff is 125 full-time equivalents, which you hope to achieve in 22-23. And you note that any additional annual costs will be offset by anticipated staff leavers or retirements. How does that offset play out in the figures you've just provided?
Totally factored in, Chairman. So we're growing, as I've talked to the committee before, up to the 125. We're not there yet. You had funded us, in fact, for 120 in the current year, and we've struggled to get to the 120. We're knocking on the door. We're nearly there, but that has had a bit of a tail, which has meant that we've been underspending this year again to get to the 120. So getting up to the 125 for 22-23 will include all anticipated leavers and retirements.
If I could add,
what is the issue with reaching that figure of 125, Rodney? Is it that you just can't get the skilled or qualified people that you require for those posts, or is it COVID related, or was there any particular reason as to why you're not getting at that figure just yet, although very close?
Yeah, so solely market-based, Chairman. We have run, most of the competitions we have run have been successful. However, there was one, for instance, that we didn't manage to secure. We had a number of applicants, but if they're not up to the anticipated standard and have the skills and attributes that we require, unfortunately, it was a competition that didn't deliver anyone successfully. Brian maybe just wants to come in, Chair, if that's okay?
Yes, Chair, if that's okay. I was just going to add that we're currently sitting at 119 full-time equivalents, so still a bit to go to get up to 125.
Yeah, and just in your opinion, is there sufficient people within the market that are skilled and qualified to meet the needs of what you require?
I'd be bold and say yes, Chairman, but that's me sticking my neck out a bit. It's very, very market dependent, and that's changing swiftly in all areas of recruitment. We have, and you will see there, and I did mention it in the opening comments, we've probably leaned a bit more into the growing our own. You know, we now have 4 apprentices and quite a number of graduate trainees in the organisation, and that talent pool, I think we're increasingly taking a more of a strategic approach with, yeah.
Well, that offers good opportunities for quite a considerable number of people, and that is to be welcomed. Has there been conversations with the universities or colleges in relation to some of these challenges?
Yeah, very much so. We engage quite extensively, and in fact, we attend all of the careers fairs of the large universities. So we're very active in that space, and that is very much the pull in terms of the graduates that we attract to the organisation.
Okay, thank you. That's me. Mr. Alistair, have you any questions?
Yes, I do have a few. Just on that issue of the growing of the staff, as the staff grows to the anticipated complement, will that reduce the level of contracting out?
No, it won't, Mr. Alistair. The level of contracting out we have set on 5-year contracts, so that's fixed for the period ahead, apart from the one that I was talking about where we've had a recent withdrawal. So what we have decided to do is take the opportunity to bring some of those contracts back in-house.
So 5 years from today, there's still those contracting out contracts?
No, this new batch will be a 5-year contract. The other ones are in year 3. So we'll now have 2 parallel processes. And
how do you assess whether that's value for money or not?
The value for money assessment is through open procurement. So when we go out to the marketplace, it's a fully open competition.
But you're spending 14% of your expenditure budget on contracting out.
We are.
You're going to increase your staff, but the 14% is going to stay.
The 14% of the budget will stay.
So just square that circle for me. You're going to have more staff, but still the same level of expenditure on contracting out.
Based on the budget, at present, the 14% is probably a bit higher because we're not meeting the staffing levels that you fund us for. So when we meet those staffing levels, as the diagram shows, we'll have 14% of the expenditure going in the contracted out audits.
You're already spending more than 14%?
At a percentage at the minute, because we're not quite on our staff base, it would be a wee bit more.
So what are you spending?
It could be 16, 17. I would have to have that.
How would that compare with other audit bodies?
It's broadly consistent. This goes away back to, would you believe it, 20 years ago to 2001 when there was a Sharman review which articulated the benefits of contracting out with the private sector firms. And it was anticipated at that time, and remember we're talking about budget numbers, when you look at it in terms of the volume of audits, it was anticipated that maybe around about 25% or so would be the optimum number to have with the private sector, so that we benefit from their work and indeed they benefit from us with that added focus on regularity. There's also, it helps us manage the peaks of the year, because if we staffed up fully to do all of the audits in-house, we would have too many staff.
Okay.
The local government side is also integrated into the Audit Office. Can you give us any insight into how much of the funding is required for the local government side?
I can. The local government side is wholly hard charged, and I'll glance at Brian to keep me right in the exact figure, but it's around about, we're asking you for just shy of £12 million, Local government is around about £1 million, maybe just over, Brian?
Yeah, that's it, in around 1 million, just short, just over it.
£1 million cost to the taxpayer,
To the office, yes.
Yes.
to the office, and the rest is hard charged?
No, that's all hard charge.
That's all hard charged? Right. And why do you not hard charge for agencies other than local government?
Interesting, we do in some cases, Mr. Allister. It depends on the statute, which sits underneath, which is the foundation of the organisations concerned. So, for instance, we don't charge for central government departments, we're not required to, but when you move into NDPBs, we charge for some and not for others, and it very much depends on what's in the statute.
Would it not be good to be
We're
uniform?
extremely tight for time. If you could bring your remarks to a close.
Okay, I was just going to suggest to you, should we not be striving to have more hard charging, particularly if there's lack of uniformity amongst the NDPBs?
There's a discussion there, Mr. Allister. The counter would also be maybe not to charge anything, to put it all in the hands of the Audit Office and not charge anything. So there's a discussion one way or the other for consistency.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Have you any final points, Jim?
No, that's okay for now.
Thank you. Alan Chambers, are you available there? Yeah.
No questions, Chair. Thank you.
That's grand. Thank you both for being with us and for taking those questions. Unfortunately, we apologise for the swiftness of this session today because we're under a bit of time pressure, but we do appreciate, as always, you being with us and taking our questions.
Thank you, Chairman, members.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
No problem. Okay. Members, is there any further information, clarification that should be requested from the Audit Office for consideration at the committee meeting on the 24th of November?
I don't think so.
Or is it okay to proceed? Okay.
Up and up.
Just as a note as well, members, with your permission and agreement, we're going to take items 9 and 10 off today's agenda and put them into the agenda for the 24th, which is the consideration of thresholds and committee input and year adjustments, and also the codification of the Audit Committee's function in relation to agreeing the Northern Ireland Assembly Commission's budget. Just we're a bit tight for time and I want to get through this evidence session. Okay, all agreed? Okay, thank you. The next item of business is the draft budget 23-25, the NI Public Services Ombudsman. Refer members to 306 to 397 of your meeting packs. And inform members that the Ombudsman and officials will attend today's meeting. And can I ask the clerk to bring them in? Yeah, they're in. Okay. Ms. Kelly, you're most welcome. With us, Sean Martin, Acting Deputy Ombudsman, NIPSO, and also Mr. John McGinnity, Director of Finances and Corporate Services of NIPSO. Can I advise that the session is being reported, as you know, in Hansard, and the transcript will be published on the committee webpage. You're most welcome to be with us, and can I ask you to make your opening remarks and, given some time pressures, to keep them as brief as humanly possible. Thank you. I'll give it over to yourself, Ms. Kelly.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thanks to committee for giving me a few minutes to provide an overview of the budget. As you will see from the paper we have submitted, we are currently working on a new strategy, and our broad strategic vision is that NIPSO makes a positive difference to people and public services in Northern Ireland by independently investigating complaints, upholding standards and ensuring learning and accountability. And I have provided an overview of the 5 strategic themes. We would intend the new strategy would be shared by the end of the calendar year, but it does broadly reflect much of the discussion that I have already had with committee regarding the need for an accessible, engaged and responsive Northern Ireland Public Services Ombudsman, with an emphasis on learning from complaints to improve public services. In terms of our overall budget, we are seeking a budget increase of just over 300,000, 307,000 to be precise, and this is made up of a number of key elements. Almost 1/3, or approximately 100,000 of that, is made up of what we consider to be inescapable additional costs, staff incremental increases, the 1.25% national insurance rise, a built-in 1% pay rise, while acknowledging that that is possibly more. and 1% that we had surrendered from our baseline last year, having been advised that there would be no pay increase, but then actually having to respond to one. We are requesting the committee's support with a number of new posts, and if I could just take you through our rationale very quickly for what they are. So obviously the main activity of NIPSO is the assessment and investigation of complaints. And despite a slight reduction in our complaint figures last year as a result of the pandemic, the overall trend since NIPSO's creation has been upward. And in this current year, we are experiencing an unprecedented rise in complaints. We have extrapolated based on current figures to the end of the year, and we are anticipating over 1,100 complaints in this year, which would represent a 23% increase on the year previously. And while to date we have managed the continuing increase of complaints with efficiencies, we are clear that to continue to manage that, we need to increase the staffing of our core investigation team. So we are looking to committee to support us in increasing that team by 2 additional investigating officers. We did almost meet our KPI 3 last year, so we came in at 68%. And on extrapolating, we hope we will meet it this year, but going forward, we know that we could no longer continue to meet that unless we put in the resources. During the last year, and as we've moved forward, we have put a focus on communication and public engagement. And it is vital to our role and to our effectiveness that citizens are aware of our work, have an understanding of when they can come to the Ombudsman, and of the kind of outcome we can deliver. And the last year has seen a considerable increase in our profile and our communications workload through the publication of our PIP-OI report, our complaint standards work, and our publication of both our investigation reports and our overview and thematic reports. And we have also had a focus on our website and social media with significant increase in traffic to both of those. We want to continue to do this, as we think one of the key mechanisms for increasing the knowledge and the understanding of our work is that public profile, and we've therefore asked committee to endorse the appointment of 1 extra communications assistant to support the communications officer that we currently have in post. In 2021, NIPSO modernised its complaint handling system, so we moved to a new system in terms of how we record our complaints, and we did so to support our ongoing work on engagement, improvement and impact. The new system represents a significant step forward for us in terms of our ability to capture and analyse information across all our systems. But in order for us to utilise the system to maximum effect, we feel we need an additional role with a bespoke set of skills to ensure we can extract the information we need in the format required. And we also want to use this enhanced reporting ability to support both OI and complaint standards. And again, we are asking for the committee's support in that additional role. So we would ask the committee to look at the budget we've presented on those and the rationale we've given, and we are of course happy to answer additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll be very brief, and I'll ask members to be brief with their questions at this point. You'll be back with us on the 24th of November, where we can have a more detailed discussion about some of these matters. But I will say I often and always have raised questions as to whether or not you have sufficient resources to deal with the level of complaint that you receive. And obviously, you've outlined very clearly today that you don't have sufficient resources and there's a requirement for extra staffing. So I certainly welcome your openness and honesty in relation to that. And also I see that quite a number of people are availing of the service that is there and are turning to it. So with that said, you budgeted for the additional 2 full-time investigating officers, which you've touched on in your opening remarks. Will the focus still remain on early resolution to bring about a remedy as a way to manage the increases in complaints?
So we do have a real focus on early resolution in the office, and that will of course continue to be the case. But what we are seeing in that increase in complaints is that they are coming through at every stage. So we are getting more initial complaints, they are flowing through to that first stage, and we have upped our number of early resolutions and settlements, but they are also flowing through to that bigger stage or final stage of investigation, which requires that more complex investigation. So we aren't just seeing an increase in our initial inquiries, we are seeing them come right through.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chambers, have you any questions? And then we'll go to Mr. Allister.
No questions, Chair. No, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Allister.
Yeah, just a couple. The cost of the Complaint Standards Authority, is that exclusively reflected in the budget line on the staff costs for the authority?
So perhaps if I can maybe ask John to come in and follow up what...
I'm happy to come in on that, Margaret, if you wish.
Thanks, John, please.
Mr. Allister, there is some element of the line that's described as general administrative expenditure that is also in support of the Complaint Standards Authority function. So the vast bulk of our estimated Complaint Standards Authority costs are staff related, but there is a small apportioned element of the non-staff expenditure within that general admin expenditure line that would also be attributable to that particular function.
So when in these tables you give a staff cost for maladministration, staff cost for own initiative, a staff cost for Complaints Standards Authority, are they really divided up like that, or is there a cross-reference between those staff? Like, presumably, own initiative staff can also do maladministration cases.
Well,
so in terms of how we're structured and operate, they sit as a team who have a focus on own initiative but have the same skills. Could they cross over both ways? So if we launched a very large own initiative, could we look to take some staff from the maladministration, because own initiative is maladministration, teams who are investigating complaints to support that, and vice versa? The answer is yes, we could. I think we have included it in that way to kind of give the committee a sense of where our yeah.
The flat line on local government, the 541, that's in the table, is subject to the note of the drawdown of the possible 244. That's referenced in paragraph 7.4. Has that drawdown been happening?
Again, I'll look to John for detail, but that drawdown hasn't happened. John?
Yes. So far, for a variety of reasons, in most recent years, owing to COVID-19 impacts, and prior to that, a year where the prior ombudsman position was vacant, we have not as yet had any occasion to call down on any of that additional provision in any of the years so far, but we're in constant liaison with with officials in the Department for Communities around the ongoing need for that, and there's an acceptance from the Department for Communities that there will inevitably come a time if current trends are borne out where we will need to draw upon some of that additional resource.
And I suppose just maybe to add to that, one of the things that we want to focus on is around engagement more around the code and promoting the understanding of the code to I suppose in the longer term reduce our cost around the investigation and adjudication side and rebalance that. And we're hoping once we are able to do that, we should be able to live within that. I think we're getting close to that budget, and we may need to draw it down just until we get to that point where we get the balance and how we perform the function right.
I can't resist asking the question I asked last year. Have you lost any cases yet against councillors, considering you're the investigator and the judge?
So there were no adjudications last year, obviously because of COVID. We currently have 3 cases that have been dealt with this year, or being dealt with at the minute. But in terms of, and I suppose I'm mindful of the barriers around, that separation protocol, and I think Margaret, you'd be better to answer that than me.
So, and I think I would maybe ask what you mean by lost. So those cases that have gone through to adjudication?
Yes. The arrangements are that under your organisation, you provide the investigator, and then when you proceed against a councillor, you take them in front of yourselves, and so you're both investigator and decision maker. And you told me last year that, unsurprisingly, you hadn't lost any cases in the sense that none of your investigations which recommended proceeding against the councillors had been not found to be made out.
And we have taken a number, so there's been 3 adjudications this year and there are 3 ongoing. I think that I would report on that separately, but I would say, Mr Alistair, and I know this has come up on a number of occasions, and I know committee are looking at that issue around the split between investigation and adjudication, and I actually look forward to what committee come up with on that.
Okay. Mr. Alistair, we do need to move on.
Yeah.
Thank you both for being with us and for taking questions. We will be able to return to this on the 24th of the month for a much more detailed conversation. But thank you both for being with us.
Thank you.
All of you, sorry, John, I forgot about yourself there, and thank you, John, as well. Okay. Members, if there's any further information, clarification should be requested from IPSO for consideration. Can you alert the clerk now or raise it? All okay?
Okay.
Okay. We'll move on to the next item. Appointment of the NIAO Chairman and Non-Executive Director. Refer members to pages 437 and 441 of the meeting pack for relevant papers. Can I remind members that at the last meeting the committee considered correspondence from the Audit Office requesting that consideration be given to endorsing the extensions of the appointments of the Chairperson of the Northern Ireland Audit Office Advisory Board and 2 non-executive members. Following the discussion, the committee wrote to the Audit Office seeking clarification on a number of issues regarding the Advisory Board. Can I advise members that the NIAO has responded, setting out details of the appointment process for the Chairperson and non-executive members of the Board, issues that might arise, should any new appointments be for a 1-year term only, issues that might arise should extensions be granted for a 1-year term only, and remuneration details. A view has been expressed that a 2 or 3 year extension would be preferable. Can I ask members whether they are content to endorse the extensions of the appointments of the Chairperson of the Advisory Board and 2 non-executive members for a period of 2 to 3 years, 3 years maximum?
Chair, I expressed the view the last time. I thought that in the circumstances 1 year was adequate, but I think that remains my view.
Yeah, I think we had a wider discussion about that the last time, Mr. Alistair, that it would cause difficulties in terms of, I'm trying to remind myself of the conversation, but it would create difficulties in terms of attracting someone for the position as well.
But they're reappointments. They're simply extensions. So, the point was, as I recall,
Clerk, what did we agree on the last meeting in relation to this matter when it was last raised?
Well, the issues were raised by Mr. Alistair, and we'd agreed to go back to the Audit Office to seek the views specifically on what the issues were, if any new appointments for 1 year, if extensions were granted for 1 year, what the impact of that would be, and the remuneration details. The committee agreed to return to it at this meeting.
Okay. Can we refer back to this, Clerk, because we're really tight for time here and feeling the pressure.
Yes. Me too.
I think we probably need to look at this on the 24th and deal with it once and for all.
Okay. No.
Okay.
Okay.
Can inform members there are 2 remaining items of correspondence for consideration. That'll be very brief. Item 1 on page 433 of the meeting pack is notice of the NI Audit Office report on the Assembly members' contributory pension fund accounts 2020. A full copy of the report is provided to members on request. Can I ask members that are content to note? Yes. Okay. Item 2, page 444 of the meeting pack is correspondence from an individual to Mr. Alistair regarding quality of the work carried out by the Audit Office. Ask members that are content that the correspondence forwarded to the Audit Office to respond directly to the individual, asking that the committee is copied into the response. Okay. The final item, committee staff will check if the individual is content for contact details to be shared, so that's all in line with as required. Any other business? Can I ask members if there are any other business?
Nope.
Okay, members will return to some of these items at the next meeting. It's a bit time challenging today. The date, time and place of the next meeting is at 14:05 to 14:10. Advise members that the next Audit Committee meeting will take place on Wednesday 24th of November, room 29 at 12:40 as listed. Meeting is now adjourned. Thank you, members.
Northern Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29.